who'd been on a carnivore diet for 6 months and showed something approximating a 90% reduction.
Be careful to follow anyone's advice when it comes to dieting, including mine, of course. Um, you know, being carnivore for a while is good, but even being vegan, which is horrible in general, is good for a little while because we are so bad at digesting some of the nutrients in vegetables that being vegan for some people, especially if they're not eating the right things or whatever, it's kind of equivalent to fasting. And fasting tends to be good for most people because most people have enough, extra adipose tissue and whatever. So it's basically like, even though being vegan is kind of the opposite of eating meat, it's they start eating their own meat and their own fat. So it gives people this impression that for a little while it's going to be good. Likewise, with the carnivore diet, there's associated dangers where, if you are sufficiently fat, then for a while you're going to be just digesting yourself, plus the meats and fats that you eat. And also, it is pretty good if you have some sort of autoimmune disease because an elimination diet tends to be positive in that way. One thing that is true is that, vegetables evolved to poison us, animals evolved to flee from us. So you're more likely to have a bad reaction to a vegetable or to a fungi, to anything that can't move, than you are to eating animals. That said, I'm a biological anthropologist, and of course, there are no societies that are vegan. Veganism is extremely unhealthy and bad. I've talked about that in a few videos, but there's only like very few societies that eat only meat, and it's because they're so far up north that there isn't any vegetable accessible anywhere, and it doesn't seem to be what caused the evolution of any of the human groups we know of. So, for example, I'm like partially Italian, partially Portuguese genetically, and my people definitely evolved eating a variety of things that I guess today we call the Mediterranean diet. And different peoples in different parts of the world evolve different diets. If you're South Asian, you might survive vegetarianism, but pretty much for everyone else, I think that, vegetarianism, of course, it's not so bad as being vegan, but it is pretty bad. And that study wasn't a double-blind controlled study. It's just a study that, asks people who have been on the carnivore diet for 6 months what has happened. So those people in general, they're going to have started a diet with a higher likelihood because they were trying to take care of their health. That would already improve their health. B, they're more likely to have autoimmune problems because that's how Peterson and Michaela promoted the carnivore diet. And that's what got a lot of people into knowing more about it. So for those people, it is more beneficial. And then there's an evolutionary argument, which is kind of interesting, which is, evolutionary pressure is strongest when you're a spermatozoid, right? Because only one makes it to the egg. And then it's like a little less strong when you're a baby. And then it's a little less strong when you're a child and so on. And then after you reproduce, it gets significantly weaker, even though gammas can be used for procuring and providing resources for their genetic offspring. At some point, they are not like as evolutionarily relevant, which means that the pressure and selection, the Darwinian selection in older people is weaker than in younger people. And because a lot of the adaptations we have to eating these agricultural products and vegetables and so on is relatively recent, right? Like humans have only done agriculture for, a little over 10,000 years. This creates a risk where the younger people will have felt those selective pressures, but the older people will have not. Which means that older people are more likely to do better by going in a diet that is more carnivorous, that has lower carbs, and specifically that has fewer agriculturally cultured vegetables, because they didn't have the evolutionary time to adapt to these new, unusual digestive times in which we live that have more of these things like, wheat, corn, and whatever. So there's an evolutionary argument in favor of becoming carnivore when you are evolutionarily old. And I know that, we think of old people as people who are like, I don't know, 75 and further, but evolutionarily old is kind of like 40, So if you're 40 or more, you have a good reason maybe to give it a try for the carnivore diet. But then again, there is survival bias, right, in that study. So you're only dealing with the people who continue doing that for 6 months and who are willing to talk about it in a carnivore forum, and obviously that's going to select for the people to whom that was beneficial. Um, so yeah, I would say it's basically like be cautious about it because there hasn't been enough time to study those things. If you know already for a fact that you are compatible with a diet that is non-carnivore, you can probably keep that diet, maybe increase the percentage of meat as you get older, so that your body has to deal with a little bit less of the toxins and poisons in non-meat products. But don't advocate aggressively for a thing just because that particular Harvard study says so, or because Peterson said so, and so on. That's not a good way of approaching a change in diet. Of course, I mean the likelihood that it's better than the old like pyramid American diet thing that was done by the Department of Agriculture to sell corn syrup and some other silly stuff. I mean, obviously it is better, right? Like I'm not gonna deny that. But I also think that there might be some risk in having like this massive restrictive diet. And I can say that because I've been doing my own. I'm in my own wellness journey, so to speak, and I've been eating a significantly small fraction of what a person would normally eat. I got a community violation struck for that, so I'm not gonna like say the word of what I'm doing. But it's like that thing where your meals are mostly water, and yeah. So then you eat water, and then you eat water again, and then you eat water again, and only in like extreme cases of like when I feel extremely weak or something like that, then I eat something that isn't water. So yeah, the that kind of thing can work if you have enough fat deposits. And I had like 25 kilos, more than 55 pounds, I guess, of fat deposits to take out. And I've taken out more than 25 already, and I'll probably continue taking out the rest. Um, but yeah, don't do anything that's extraordinarily risky unless you have like very significant reason to do that. I also don't recommend, as I said, don't do what I'm doing. What I'm doing, I think, is useful if you have ADHD and you can't form habits and you've tried another like a myriad of other varieties of diets, and historically in your life you've been very successful at doing things when you do them in a radical, like super intense way, as opposed to creating or forming a habit. That's when there's most benefit, I guess, which will turn out to be something like 5% of the population, 4% of the population. So if you're just a person who like happened to scroll into this video and for some reason decided to watch it, I would highly recommend not eating mostly water for 30 days, which is what I'm doing. I'm day 10-6. And now I'm gonna do it for 90 days. So don't eat water for most of your meals for 90 days, and don't eat the carnivore diet, but definitely don't be vegan. That would be like a much bigger mistake. Yeah, and the older you are, the more you want to focus on meat products and less on agricultural products. And that's my diet advice, to the extent that I can give some diet advice.